Good afternoon, ladies. My name is Daniela Villavicencio. I'm a senior at Queens College in New York City and an intern with the Luce Center this summer. One of the most special things about this summit is the opportunity to be surrounded by strong, courageous, conservative women. Women who may leave a lasting impact on you and remind you what it looks like to lead with grace. Today, we have the honor of hearing from someone who has done exactly that at the very highest levels of government. KT McFarland is one of the most accomplished national security experts of our time. She has spent her life breaking barriers and defending American principles. She served as Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, and before that, she was the highest-ranking woman in the Reagan Defense Department, where she held the position of Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. Her public service began even earlier, in the Nixon and Ford administrations, a true testament to her decades of experience and unwavering commitment to our country. KT has helped shape American foreign policy, written speeches for Henry Kissinger, and sat in the Situation Room during some of the most critical moments in modern history. When not inside the halls of government, she's been a trusted voice on Fox News, boldly defending conservative values and offering clear, fearless commentary on foreign affairs. She is also a best-selling author. Her book, Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People, delivers a powerful defense of the principles she stands for. She has also been happily married for 40 years and has 5 children and 11 grandchildren, which is amazing. KT McFarland has paved the way for women like us to lead boldly. She proves that it's possible to serve with strength, speak with clarity, and make a lasting impact, all without compromising your beliefs. Please join me in welcoming a true trailblazer and an inspiration to so many of us, KT McFarland.
Daniela and I are both New Yorkers. We're probably the only true Republican New Yorkers you'll ever meet. And I want to point out that we wear the same outfits, black and white stripe. We've got the memo. I want to tell you that I'm probably the only person in the room who ever met Claire Boothe Luce. I met her in the early 1970s when I was at the White House. I was working in the West Wing of the White House as an aide to Henry Kissinger. And she would come to the White House and meet with then President Nixon. And she was so cool. She was really tiny, beautifully groomed at all times, and absolutely perfectly poised, and one of the toughest women you will ever meet. So the fact that you're all here is a testament to her legacy. She was a trailblazer before anybody knew there was a trail to blaze. So bravo to all of you. And I just want to say something to each one of you. It has not been easy being a conservative woman on any college campus in America today. And the courage that you've shown and your ability to think for yourselves and not just follow the masses and follow the groups and be cool and just mimic the stupid stuff people say. I really admire each one of you because you're thinking for yourselves and you are the spear, you are the forefront of a movement that is going to change America for a generation. So bravo to you. I thought that what I would talk about is, so foreign policy is my thing. Majored in Chinese studies in college, went to Oxford, went to MIT, taught nuclear weapons at MIT. And then in and out of government, did the foreign policy, the military, the defense strategy. But in the Trump administration, I had the job of Deputy National Security Advisor. So you think, okay, so what are the foreign policy jobs in any White House? Well, there's a Secretary of State, and that's a person who zooms all around the world, meeting allies, going to meetings in the cabinet with the president, the person who's up front. And then there's the National Security Advisor in most cases, and that person is at the president's elbow for everything, like every crisis that happens. What are we going to do today? Oh my gosh, Putin just bombed Kyiv. What should we do? And that's the sort of crisis manager person. And then there's the Deputy National Security Advisor, and that's the person who's supposed to be the deep thinker, the one who comes up with what are our long-range plans? How do we take a president's bumper sticker statements during a campaign and turn them into real policies? So that was my job. So it's worth talking about like the fundamentals of what President Trump's trying to do. He's remaking the world. And he's doing it because for the first time, a couple of things have aligned to give us that ability to do so. Number one, We are the most powerful economy in the world. If you look at economic growth, who buys stuff from other countries? We are the world's biggest market. It used to be 10 years ago, well, the Europeans bought a lot of stuff, and then 5 years ago, people thought, well, China's going to be the world's biggest market. No. Europe has no economic growth. China don't believe any of their figures. They have no economic growth either. We've had economic growth even in the horrible Biden administration. And President Trump is doing a whole bunch of things with the big, beautiful bill to cut taxes, to cut streamline regulations, and the American economy is going to take off like a rocket ship, probably in the next 3, 4, or 5 months. Hopefully it takes off with enough growth that President Trump retains control of Congress, of the House of Representatives and the Senate. But what that means is that every country needs to sell their stuff to us. So if China is making Apple computers, they need to sell to us because nobody else has enough people and a big enough market to buy their stuff. If you're Scotland, you need to sell your whiskey to us. But we have alternatives. You know, we could make Apple computers at home. We could buy Irish whiskey. We could probably buy Kentucky bourbon. So we have alternatives nobody else has. Now, that's been the case for a long time, but President Trump understands what that gives him is extreme ability to use that as leverage with every country. So what he's doing with the tariffs, the tariff wars, and everybody's telling you, oh, we're going to have inflation, or, you know, that cheap stuff you buy on Amazon is going to be 20% higher. No. What's happening is he's using that leverage to say to the president of this country, I think to the Prime Minister of Canada a few hours ago, you better have access. We want access to your markets. We'll buy your stuff, but we're going to do it on a level playing field. We're not going to continue to give you preferential treatment. And if you don't like it, terrific. We're just not going to buy your stuff. You'll go bankrupt. So he's able to negotiate all these trade deals one at a time, and he's renegotiating them. Now, people say, well, we want fair trade, free trade. The old days of free trade meant that it was free for them and not for us. And the reason it was that way was because at the end of World War II, the United States looked at Europe, which was devastated, Asia, which was devastated. Remember, Japan had the 2 nuclear weapons dropped. The whole world was in terrible shape. And American leaders at the time thought, okay, how do we prevent World War III? We've just had World War I, which we had to bail Europe out. We've just had World War II, which we had to bail them. Now, how are we going to prevent World War III? Because we would get involved. And so they decided, well, what we're going to do is use American money and ingenuity, and we are going to underwrite. We're going to pay for everybody else's defense, so they don't have to spend money on defense. We'll pay for it. We'll also pay for everybody's economy. So Germany, you want to make cars? Terrific. You can sell them in America, and we're only going to put a 2% tax on a car. But if an American car gets sold in Germany, you're going to put a 25% tax. Why? It's totally to our disadvantage. But we think that that'll help you grow your society, grow your economy. We'll be trading partners. And the whole thing worked brilliantly until we realized that we didn't need to do it. And they didn't need to be underwritten. I mean, the way I like to think of it is the way I tell my grandchildren is, look, you know, mom and dad are going to pay for college. They'll get the loans. They'll, you know, you can use their car. They'll underwrite your dorm fees. But eventually you're going to graduate and you're going to be able to support yourself, and then you're off of mom and dad's payroll. You got to do it yourself. And, you know, we all get that, but nobody likes it, right? Who's really enjoying the fact that all of a sudden, you know, you have to pay for your own car, or nobody's paying for the rent? Well, that was what was happening to our European and Asian allies when we said to them, pay your fair share, you're able to do it. And they said, no, we don't want to. I mean, my German equivalent told me at the beginning of President Trump's first term, when I said, well, President Trump expects you, Germany, to pay 2% of your GNP towards our common defense. And he looked at me and said, oh, that's so naive. That's so unrealistic. We won't do it. Well, sure enough, Germany is now going to pay 5% of their GNP towards our common defense. Thank you, Donald Trump. So President Trump understood that power of the trade was going to give us unique leverage. The other thing he understood was energy. So America has, but basically because of the gift of God, our resources, but because of American entrepreneurs and engineers and project managers, we learned how to do 3D mapping, you know, AI mapping. We learned how to do horizontal drilling. So instead of just in the old days, you put You put it down like on Landman, if anybody's seen that, and then the gusher comes up. We know how to put it down, and then we drill horizontally. What that has allowed us to understand is that we, the United States, have enough oil and natural gas to power the entire world, just us, the entire world for hundreds of years. And we can do it cheaper, better, faster, safer than anybody else. That was the case about 8 years ago. It's really the case now. So what that means is the secondary effect of that is that we don't need to be entangled in forever wars in the Middle East to guarantee access to oil. It also means that we can bankrupt our adversaries because we have the ability to do this. Our companies, our oil companies, gas companies, can make a profit if oil is at about $50, $60 a barrel. The other countries which are oil exporters, Iran, Russia, Middle East countries, they need it at $100 a barrel because their oil exports pay for everything in their society, right? I mean, who buys an Iranian car, right? Or who buys a Russian computer? Nobody buys that stuff. You know, Russian fashion, sure. So that the only thing they have to sell are their natural resources. And since we, the United States, can force the price of oil down, that means the bad guys are broke. So Russia and Iran see their income stream cut in half. Guess what's really expensive? War. And guess why Russia and Iran, well, Russia did not invade during Trump, and did invade during George Bush, George W. Bush, Obama, and Biden, because oil prices were high. They had the money to do it. When President Trump came into office the first time, he pushed the price of oil down. Russians were broke, didn't have any money. Now, President Trump likes to say, oh, they didn't invade because I'm so tough. Yeah, part of it is that. But part of it is that they didn't have the money to do it. When Biden came in, he gave him basically a gift of $100 billion with Biden's energy policy. And that's what Russia used to invade Ukraine. Similarly, and it's the same story with Iran. Iran, under Trump, was sanctioned. They couldn't sell their oil abroad, and even if they could sell it, the price was about $40 a barrel. Biden comes in, undoes all the Trump stuff, has the Green New scam, oil predictably goes to $100 a barrel. Iran has an additional $100 billion, which they used for Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and to invade and to attack Israel on October 7th. So the first thing is that we're the biggest market, and we can renegotiate everybody's trade deals because they have to buy stuff in America. They have to sell their stuff to Americans. And the second is that we now have the energy capability to be not just energy independent, but energy dominant. That means we run the table on the world for energy. Those two things added together are the fundamental way Donald Trump is conducting American foreign policy. He's not going to grab the machine gun or the Marines to invade. He's going to use our economic superiority and our economic weapons. The other thing that it was on great display in the last couple of weeks is American technology and American military capability. When Trump bombed Fordo, the nuclear reactor sites in Iran, you could have heard jaws dropping in every capital around the world saying, we couldn't have done that. Whether it was in Moscow or whether it was in Beijing, they may think that we're just like the Americans, we're just as good. Nobody could come close to pulling off that military operation. And then when it happened, and we all saw the satellite pictures of what used to be a mountain was now a mountain with a big hole and a lot of rubble on the top. And when critics of President Trump said, oh, well, you didn't get all the nuclear you didn't get all the uranium, you didn't. Fine, look, we already know how to get it again. Just if they want to spend a couple $1 billion more to rebuild, we'll just bomb them again. So all those things taken together, to me, show that we've had those capabilities, but we've never had a president with the guts to do it. The guts to just say, I don't care if you don't like what I'm doing, I'm going to do it because it's the right thing. So what does this mean for you? And why am I optimistic about the future of the country and really the future of world peace? You know, when President Trump, I was co-chairman of the transition for the first term, and President Trump is given to sort of, we're the best, right? Everything is the best. And it's a little hyperbole, and you think, yeah. Okay, we're the best. What he says now, we're the best, he really means that we have the capability of having a golden age in America. And you will ride that wave for 20 years because he's going to get peace around the world, again, because he's going to force it. He's going to have American manufacturing, and American trade will be the envy of the world. Because of our cheap energy, we're going to dominate the world's energy supplies. And because of our cheap energy, we will become a manufacturing hub again. And not just making, tennis shoes. We're going to be a high-tech hub. And one of the reasons I find it so exciting is that what he's done is he's emphasizing artificial intelligence, quantum computing, all of which needs one thing: a lot of energy. If you're going to run those computers to do artificial intelligence and quantum computing, you need 3 or 4 times the amount of energy we already are producing. And guess it's the only country in the world who has that ability to ramp up, and that's us. The other thing I would say, though, which is to me really exciting, is that President Trump, I figured he would do all of this because I saw Ronald Reagan do it. And I was your age, maybe a little older, when President Reagan came into office. And it was a very similar situation where the predecessor president, Jimmy Carter, he screwed up the American economy, screwed up American energy, and we were being kicked around by every country in the world. And because Jimmy Carter was so bad, Ronald Reagan was elected. And Ronald Reagan did 3 things. He said, I'm going to fix the American economy, which he did. It was his equivalent of the big, beautiful bill. But he cut taxes, streamlined regulations, and the American economy took off like a rocket ship for 20 years. The second thing is, I'm going to win the Cold War. And he did, in large part because we bankrupted our adversaries and because we had the technology edge. But then the thing that President Reagan did that really inspired my generation was he made us really proud of who we are. If you ever want to be inspired, go back and listen to some of Ronald Reagan's speeches about the greatness of America. He didn't talk about the greatness of Ronald Reagan. He talked about the greatness of America. And because we had fallen out of love with ourselves as a nation in the 1970s, we had the Vietnam War, we had our cities were burning. Americans hated America. And President Reagan taught us to love America. And because he loved America, we loved America again. And oddly enough, Donald Trump is doing the same thing. Donald Trump 8 years ago was more about, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Have you listened to him lately? It's all about what everybody else is doing. He brings the pilots who bombed the nuclear reactor in Iran, he brings them into the Oval Office. He takes college kids who are, captain of the baseball team. He brings them into the Oval Office. He's celebrating who we are, and he's proud of who we are. And sometimes sounds a little corny, but corny's okay. Because for 40 years, we've been telling ourselves we've polluted the planet, we're racist, we're sexist, we're whateverist, we're terrible people, we're oppressors. And we now finally have a president who celebrates who we are. And he is now embarked, as of July 4th, 5th maybe, on a 365-day of celebrating who America is. And as we ramp up to the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, you are going to see patriotic events all across the country. And so it won't just be the women at the Claire Boothe Luce groups and the conservative women on campus who say, America's really great, really great. You're going to now see an explosion of patriotism in the country. Now, you're not going to see it with the mainstream media, but look, who cares? Nobody's reading those guys anyway. And you're not going to see it from the Democrats because, who are the Democrats, right? They're like 90-year-old people, older than I am, and then a bunch of loonies. There's no opposition. And so I think that what you're going to see in the next year is us believing in ourselves again. You're going to see American achievement like you've never seen it before. And we are the wave of the future. And I just think it is so great that you're part of it. And you got a choice. You can go back to your campuses and, do your work. You always do your work. But you can also be part of a revolution. And if you don't get involved, if you don't work for your political candidates, if you don't, write letters to your newspaper, if you don't hold meetings at your college campus, even though everybody thinks that Republicans are bad guys, you go out and fight the fight and fight it in the local level because you are the warriors. And if you don't, if you sit it out and say, I can't be bothered, I really have to study for that exam, definitely study for that exam. But don't fail to be members of your community because you don't want to spend your older years saying, I'm sitting around the campfire, America used to be great. You want to sit around that campfire and say, yeah, America is great, and I was part of it. I was a foot soldier in the Trump revolution. I was part of the group of people who brought the country back together, because you are there. And guess what? The added bonus is, do you know who the happiest people in America are? Conservative women. So for no other reason, do it because you want to be happy. Anyway, I'm very happy to be here. I'm thrilled to answer any questions. We can get into a lot of specifics if you want. We can talk about Iran. We can talk about Russia. Talk about China, nuclear weapons, economics, anything. Okay? So is anybody ready to ask a question? You are never going to have somebody with 50 years of experience, so let it rip, girls.
Thank you so much. Such an honor to have you here today. I just want to say, specializing in nuclear weapons at MIT, talk about women in STEM, impressive. Anyway, so yeah, questions now, if you'd like. Oh, we have a really long line. So please say your name, school, and organization.
Hi, I'm Katie Kenline. I just graduated from Grove City College in Pennsylvania. Recently, I don't know if anyone has seen the clip, Justice Ketanji Brown is on stage saying that she, what keeps her up most at night is the state of democracy in the United States. And that's a term that's thrown around a lot, I think, by young influencers, people on our campuses who say democracy is dying in America. With your foreign policy experience, could you tell us how you think we can best combat that lie and why that's wrong?
Okay, well, first of all, democracy is not dying, right? What she represents, and I don't ever like to speak ill of justices, but what she represents is the last dying breed of the elite gasp of people who think they're so much smarter than you are and that they should be the ones in charge. I mean, that was the whole election of Donald Trump, which is that the people voted for him. And when Donald Trump, served hamburgers in the drive-up window at McDonald's, okay, it was a cute gimmick, but he gave honor and dignity to people who have all jobs, not just the people who are Wall Street lawyers or some academic think tank. And when President Trump gave that speech in Saudi Arabia about 2 months ago, and he said, look, America is not going to come and boss you around. We're not going to tell you what God to believe in or how to govern yourselves or how you should organize your societies. Those are your decisions to make. That's democracy. And when people say to you, well, he's undemocratic, take it a notch back. Okay, what do you mean? Did he win the election? What's the answer? He won it so overwhelmingly and astoundingly in such historic proportions. It is very difficult for those people to say, well, he stole it. He didn't steal it. He won that election. And do you believe in democracy? Do you believe that people have the right to choose their leaders? Well, the people have chosen. You might not like that choice. Fine, then go out and, go vote for Mondami or something as mayor of New York. But the people have spoken, and that's when all the people who say, well, he's not smart enough to be president, or he doesn't understand, or he's like crushing the Constitution, what are they really saying? What they're saying is that nobody likes them. Nobody thinks they're doing the right thing, right? Remember when I said Trump had the media against him, he had the Democrats against him, he had the bureaucracy against him? Well, they've all disappeared. The media, again, we're not watching them. We're watching our young influencers. Where are our young influencers or podcasters here? Probably half of the room is. They're not listening to the Democrats because, again, it's crazy people or really old people. And they're not listening to the bureaucracy because, thank you, Elon Musk, you've doged it. We're going to codify Doge. We're going to get rid of those people. The only group left that has permanent Trump derangement syndrome, which is incurable, are the courts. Are a few people in the courts who think that they're smarter than everybody else, that they should be in charge. So you just say, look, I believe in democracy. If you don't like the results, go fight for a new election. Go elect your guy and stop complaining about mine.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Isela. I go to Biola University. I work in the National Security Department at the Heritage Foundation, which has been super inspiring and fun. But my question for you...
So do you work for Victoria Coates?
I work for Robert Greenway.
Oh, he used to work for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. Just you tell him you saw the big boss.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
I'm missing work for this, so I will tell them I saw.
Yeah, you really.
Okay. So my question is that I know that we have a lot of power through strength, so our military needs to be strong in order for us to deter our adversaries. Mm-hmm. But when huge issue is we're not seeing procurement of ships and Navy and ammunition and naval power. And so I was wondering how the administration, the DoD, even Congress can incentivize the Navy to procure more ships in order to deter our adversaries in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, as the mother of a naval officer, my daughter, Lieutenant Commander Fiona McFarland, Naval Academy graduate, I really like ships, but I've got to tell you, that's not the only answer. And what happened really for the 20 years of the forever wars in the Middle East is we particularly let the Navy atrophy. We didn't pay attention to, we paid a lot of attention to the Army and to the Marines, but we sucked up all the money we were spending went to forever wars. In fact, both sides of the forever wars, which we could never win. And so what we let slip was our technological edge, which we always assume, right? Americans, we're better than anybody else at inventing stuff and creating stuff, but we let it slip. So that there's several weapons classes that we don't know how to make. They're called hypersonic weapons. I won't go into the details, but anyway, China makes them, Russia makes them, we can't figure out how to make them, and we have no defense against them. The Navy is another problem where we have not spent the kind of money that we should for a cutting-edge Navy. Now, cutting edge doesn't necessarily mean a lot of ships. It also means really high tech. And that's where we need to not only to focus our procurement dollars, but we need to make sure that other countries don't steal our stuff, but we really need to streamline the process. You know, World War II, we could build ships, I mean, dozens of ships a week. It takes years to build a ship now, and by the time it's built, it's obsolete. So we really need to streamline procurement. And the other thing we need to do is not let the defense industrial base atrophy. The reason Europe is in so much trouble right now is that they don't make military equipment anymore. They thought, well, we're going to have peace, the Cold War is over, America's going to defend us forever, and so why should we spend money on defense? We'll spend it on social services. And as a result, now that they need to ramp up after Russia invaded Ukraine, they don't have the stuff to buy. So the lag time for the Europeans to catch up will be quite long. But we've got the money. We have the technology. We just need to do it, and we need to stop sort of dithering around about getting stuff made. And we certainly should stop the whole DEI craziness where 20-30% of every dollar that we're spending on defense is going out, well, I think to grifters. But that when we spend our money, we should spend our money on military equipment and training people to be what they're meant to be when they're in the military, which is warriors.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hi, Mrs. McFarland. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and speaking to us. My name is Elia Cohen. I go to Bucknell University, and I'm interning at the Media Research Center.
Oh, great.
I wanted to ask you, as a young Jewish conservative myself that truly, truly looks up to you and the work you've done, specifically in national security and defense, I wanted to ask, what steps should I be taking or can be taking as someone who is extremely interested in international security and defense, specifically in U.S.-Israel relations?
It's a great question because, none of us of my generation ever thought we would hear anti-Semitism ever, and now it seems to be prevalent. Let me just tell you about when I was your age. So I got to work in the White House, a series of flukes, but I typed the president's daily brief for Henry Kissinger to give to Richard Nixon every morning. And so I had a little office in the West Wing, which is, I don't know, about a third of the size of the stage. And when Golda Meir, who had left being Prime Minister of Israel, and she had been Prime Minister of Israel during the October 1973 war, and she was sitting in the Roosevelt room all by herself, and I'm kind of walking past the Oval Office, handing my papers off that I had just typed, and I see, oh my God, there's Golda Meir sitting there. And at first I didn't think it was I thought it was like the cleaning lady because she had like really screwy hair and she had like really old lady shoes on and she was sort of hunched over. And so I went up to her and she'd just written her memoirs. So I scampered back to my office. I brought the book and I said, Prime Minister Meir, could I just introduce myself? And so she gets up from this tiny little old lady and she sort of staggers up, all of 5'1" of her, and she just seemed huge because she was such a big personality. And so I said, can you sign this, please? And then she grabbed my hands, and this is like one of the most existential moments of my life. And she said, promise me one thing. And she looked into my eyes, and I thought, oh my God, this is like God talking to me. And so Golda Meir's holding my hands, and she said, will you promise me you'll always be a friend of Israel? I said, oh, I promise I'll always be a friend of Israel. And I never really thought about it, that of course we're a friend of Israel. I mean, Israel is a country that, I mean, it has every reason to exist and every reason to thrive and every reason to be one of America's closest allies. And I never thought that we would get to the point that we are today where people would say, are you a friend of Israel? And have that be a real question mark. So what do you do about it? You just talk about it. And don't be ashamed of it. And be proud of who you are. And be proud of America's relationship with Israel. It's because of Israel that we are having the Abraham Accords, and we will, I think, within 3 years, have peace in the Middle East. It is because of Israel that Iran's nuclear program and Iran's malicious regime, which has been holding the world hostage and blackmailed for 45 years, is cowering in their caves. So be proud of Israel. Be proud of that startup nation, because Israel will lead the entire Middle East into a technology revolution. So don't be afraid of who you are, and whatever you do, don't cower. Just be proud of it. And then dare anybody to make the argument of how they think Iran is so great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Hi, I'm Ariella Rusoff. I work for Senator Schmidt's office. I am a military legislative correspondent. I graduated from Wisconsin, Madison, actually.
I grew up there.
I know. And you went to West, right?
I went to West High. Did you
Yeah.
go to West High?
No, I'm from New York. So
Oh,
so
yeah,
many
of course. Everybody
things.
from New York had to leave New York to go to Wisconsin. I was in Wisconsin. I left to go to New York.
I love Madison, obviously. I
Cool.
graduated in 22, and then I was at the DOD, and now I was doged, unfortunately, but it was honestly the best thing that happened because now I'm, at Senator Schmidt's office. and
He's awesome.
I'm amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just went through NDAA, as you're probably aware. So my question is, I'm still in the beginning of my career and, trying to navigate the world in national security, especially as a woman. Like, what would you go back and tell your younger self? And what do you wish you could kind of do over or do differently?
Well, first of all, I think that if you look back and try to, I shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Yeah.
that's a lose. Just look forward. You can't rewrite history. You can only rewrite the future. What I learned, and remember, I'm of a different era when women, I went to Oxford University and the Rhodes Scholarship wasn't open to women. And so I was accepted at Oxford and had to cobble together scholarships. When I went to MIT and taught my class in nuclear weapons, those undergraduate guys, they'd never seen a woman. It was probably why the attendance was so high in my class. MIT guys really don't ever see women. And so I guess I would say to you that what always worked best for me was a couple of life rules. One, do the right thing for the right reason. And even if it seems to be to your great disadvantage at the moment, it'll all work out well. The other thing I learned was be just better prepared than anybody else and work harder. The thing that I find so frustrating, I think, about the DEI and women's thing is that don't expect to be handed anything on a plate. Just earn it. You want to get to the point where any boss, whether it's Senator Schmidt or whether it's the Heritage Foundation, if you're a really good employee and worker and you do a good job, they need you as much as you need them. So just make sure that you're indispensable. And whatever it takes to be indispensable and work harder than everybody else. The only time that got me in trouble was I was working on Capitol Hill in the Senate Armed Services Committee. I was the first woman professional on the Armed Services Committee, and so I was working away. I worked so hard. I'd gone to MIT, I taught nuclear weapons. I was with these guys who didn't work that hard, my colleagues. And so the staff director called me into his office on a Friday night, and he said, look, this isn't working out. And I said, what isn't working out? And he said, having you here on the Armed Services Committee staff. I said, what do you mean? I'm working harder than everybody else. I just written an article for I just ghost wrote something for the chairman. And he said, well, this is the problem. You're working so much harder than everybody else that you're showing up the boys. And they really don't want to have to work that hard. And I've got to think about, unit cohesion and esprit de corps. And you're really ruining that because you're a woman and you're working hard. Anyway, so like you who got doged and ended up in a better place, I ended up within a week's time of getting an offer from the Secretary of Defense to come and be his personal assistant. So again, I just think keep working really hard, be smarter, better, and harder working than anybody else. Don't expect a darn thing. Don't have a chip on your shoulder. And at the end of the day, people will come seeking you out, as you've just seen.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Hello, it was such a pleasure to meet you this morning, and I just want to thank you for being here. You've inspired so many women in this room, not only with your career achievements, but also your ability to balance that with being a mother. So many of us want to be mothers one day, so we really look up to you for that. As a reporter myself, I work for the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform. I've reported a lot about the foreign funding in America's colleges and universities, and I find it pretty concerning of how much is flowing in from China, from India, even from countries like England. How much does that foreign funding in America's universities concern you, and what do you think the solution is there?
Well, when people buy stuff with their money, right? So they're buying influence with their money. And whether it's the Confucius Institutes on college campuses, which are really spy operations for China, or whether it's some of the dirty money out of the Middle East, which is funding a lot of the anti-Israel sentiment at places like Columbia, I think we need to look at it. And I'm not sure I would say no foreign students allowed ever, but what's happened is American universities have gotten addicted to it. They need that money, right? Because China or Qatar, whatever, they send fully funded students. Their students are paying for everybody else, and it allows colleges especially to pursue their DEI objectives. I think you just need to look at it, and I agree with Marco Rubio. It's a privilege to come to this country. It's a privilege to get a green card. It is a privilege to get a student visa. And if you want to come here and go demonstrate with your mask on, Hamas mask at Columbia University, let's have a second look at what your visa status is. But the money, just always follow the money, right? It's just always follow the money. And if the money is coming from someplace, you got to be a little suspicious. I'd take a closer look. I do think, however, that America has, because we have educated a lot of people from around the world, our soft influence has really spread. But when it gets to the point where 30% of the student body is fully paid Chinese students and somehow Americans are squeezed out, I think we need to do a real rethink.
Thank you so much.
We have one final question.
This better be a good one.
I hope so.
No pressure.
My name is Gabriela Fernandez. I'm a student at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. I'm studying diplomacy and international relations. So it's an honor to get to hear you speak and even ask you a question. And there's so much I'd love to ask you as a student interested in national security. But the one I want to stick with for today is maybe not a lot of, but often a narrative I'll hear in my classes as I'm studying international relations and security and conflicts abroad is that a lot of the issues abroad the U.S. is facing today are due to past foreign policy that the U.S. has committed to, and now that past policy has brought the problems we're seeing today. For example, the Vietnam War or the wars in the Middle East when we went into other countries, and now that's coming back to us today is often the narrative. And I'm just curious what your take is on that, or what your answer would be to someone who brings that up.
I think the Chinese have a proverb. My undergraduate degree was in Chinese. Chinese have a proverb, which is a proverb which says a solution to any problem is an invitation to the next problem. So whether it was Vietnam or learn from our mistakes, but I would not have everybody, you should not be taking the guilt trip that people are trying to put on you. And I think one of the guilt trips that people are trying to say, especially to President Trump, is, hey, wait a minute. You said you were going to end the Ukraine war. You haven't ended the Ukraine war. Or you were going to do this, you were going to do that. Understand that unlike every political leader who's happened before, so whether we were in Vietnam and we couldn't figure out how to win, or we couldn't figure out how to get out, but nobody wanted to lose, so nobody would leave, which is the same argument which was Afghanistan. Well, we didn't know how to win, but we didn't want to lose, and so you didn't want to be the president to lose, so then you just kept sort of doubling down on failed policies. The great thing about Trump, which nobody gets, is that he doesn't look at it like A, B, C, D, that's my conclusion. He gets to the conclusion and says, how am I going to get there? He's a businessman. He doesn't read Foreign Policy magazine, I promise you. If he did, actually, he would probably sleep more. Because it is a real yawn most of the time, and he only sleeps about 4 hours a night. What he does is he starts with the conclusion, Iran is not going to have nuclear weapons, and then he'll try to figure out how do we get there. Oh, well, they're not negotiating? Okay, then we'll let Israel loose. Okay, that's not working enough. So then we'll bomb Fordo. Or whether it's Ukraine, where he says, I want to put an end to the Ukraine war. So he tried to negotiate with both sides. Neither were taking it. He gets Zelensky to the Oval Office, and you're all familiar with that blow up, right? And so all of a sudden, that tactic didn't work for Zelensky. So then Trump then says, okay, Zelensky, shape up. You got to go to the negotiating table. I'm going to get Putin there. Well, it turns out Putin isn't going to the negotiating table. So today, President Trump said, look, we're going to double down. We're going to give weapons to Ukraine to fight it out. He will always have, how do I get there? And he's going to be less ideological about how you get there than to get there. Because, for example, ending the Ukraine war, he wants to get that off the list because he knows the real crisis and the real challenge is how to deal with China. And if we're still in the Middle East or we're still in fighting, with the Russians, that's just too many problems to have before you can focus on the main problem. So, don't get bogged down in the guilt trip. First of all, you weren't even born during Vietnam. Probably just hardly were born when September 11th happened. You probably weren't born when September 11th. So don't take the guilt trip and just say, let's look at the future. What is America going to do in the future? We're going to end wars. We're going to have a strong and vibrant economy. We are going to promote peace and democracy. We're not going to shove it down your throats, other countries in the world, but we are going to show that this is the best system and the best way of life, and we'll lead by example. Thank you.